lyrics and the music are from the English translation of our puja. So these words are often chanted during the puja ceremonies.
May the goddesses embodied in all the sacred rivers of the world be gathered here in this water. May the goddesses embodied in all the sacred rivers of the world be gathered here in this water. I salute the deity of the Lord. May you not allow any negative energy to enter this space. I salute the indwelling deity of this place. May all evil spirits move away from here. May those who do harm be destroyed by the will of Shiva. May evil spirits move away. 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 May those who do harm be destroyed by the will of Shiva. Oh, Mother Earth, you hold us on your lap. You are held by the Lord supreme. Hold and protect me. Sprinkle, sprinkle, holy water. Make this place of worship the room of seething particles. Manifest their divinity, divinity. Om Sarvam Kaviram Brahman. All this is verily wrong. All this is verily, verily wrong. All is wrong.
Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Maham Jyotirgamaya Mrityurmam Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Payanityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is the psychic and the spiritual, two domains that are often confused. Certainly that was true around the turn of the century in America. Swami Vedarupananda was the first Indian spiritual teacher to open the window to the light of the wisdom of the East, and the first to preach in America this Vedanta philosophy. But the way had been prepared somewhat beforehand by four forces, or influences, we can say. One was the American transcendentalists, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau. Then, too, there was the influence of the theosophical movement. Theosophy, as you know, is kind of a mix between Indian karma and reincarnation and Western occultism. Third influence we had was New Thought. New Thought means kind of an umbrella term that describes very liberal Christian denominations like Unity, Unitarianism, and Christian Science. A fourth influence was the founding in 1894 of the American Society for Psychical Research. Now, advocates of all of these groups met along with Swami Vedarupananda in Greenacre, Maine, for a spiritual conference. 1894. And at that conference, well, one famous person was the famous New Thought writer Ralph Waldo Trine, the author of that book maybe you've read, In Tune with the Infinite. But there were many metaphysicians and parapsychologists and different sorts of teachers there on that occasion, including a variety of magnetic healers, one of which Swami Vedarupananda humorously referred to as that teacher of metaphysical, chemico, physical, religioso, whatnot. And in fact, in that environment, there was kind of, the environment was very fit for the confusion of the psychism, of transpersonalism, occultism, mysticism, and spirituality. And saints and sages anticipated this even in the most ancient times and made a special effort to distinguish between these. And so this morning we're just going to focus on two of these, the psychic and the spiritual. Now let's start with the psychic. You know that we have, that is, our soul has powers. We have abilities. We have capabilities. For example, we know how to walk and to talk. and we can see, and we can hear, and we're capable of thinking, feeling, and willing. These are all capabilities that we have and that are studied by psychology. But there are other manifestations and abilities that manifest themselves, which we call psychic, and which were not understood by students of psychology, couldn't explain them according to natural law, and therefore they were always relegated to parapsychology or to religion. Now, the author of the Yoga Sutras, that is Patanjali, the father of what we call Raja Yoga, discusses these psychic phenomena in the 3rd chapter of the Yoga Aphorisms. And this is a very broad subject dealt with in detail by commentators. So I'm just going to focus on 2 categories that may be familiar to us. One category of these now we're going to talk here about these psychic phenomena, these powers. The first category are kind of like intuitive powers. And they're called intuitive because they are known by the 6th sense, that is, by the mind. And this is what these kind of things that we often are familiar with and that we call extrasensory perception. Things like mental telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance. And all of you are students of the Bhagavad Gita. You know how, when the scene opens in the beginning, that there's a great battlefield, Kurukshetra, and the Kauravas and the Pandavas and all the armies are arrayed on the field. And there's a chariot, and in the chariot there's the Arjuna and his teacher, Sri Krishna. And Arjuna asked Sri Krishna about how he's going to fight here in the war. And Sri Krishna goes on and discourses in 700 verses. And all of this is being related, all of this scene, a mile away on a hill overlooking the battlefield, is the blind King Dhritarashtra and his minister Sanjaya. And Sanjaya has powers. He has the power of clairvoyance, and so he can see miles away there. He can see the whole battlefield. He can describe all of the different warriors that are present. And he has clairaudience. He can hear the conversations even between Arjuna and Sri Krishna. And thus we have today, the Bhagavad Gita, a record of that account. As an example, I give you this as an example of intuitive psychic powers. Now, there's another category which I'll focus on. And the second category is what they call siddhis. Now, siddhis is just a general word. It just means accomplishments, achievements. So these are all siddhis. But in particular, they're referring to certain extraordinary powers. And they're extraordinary because they're not just mental, but they also have a kind of a physical manifestation. And these are called, in the commentators, refer to these as the Ashta Siddhis, Anima, Laghima, Prapti, Prakamyam, Mahima, Tata, Ishitvam, Cha. Like this, it goes down, it's like a laundry list, one after another, of these extraordinary powers. Now let me give you an example of one of these siddhis. The great ideal devotee of Lord Rama, that is Hanuman, the monkey god, was en route to the great battle in the battlefield of Ceylon. And he came to the end of the Indian continent, and there he stood. He had to cross over to the island. There's no ferry boat. There's no way to cross. No problem for Hanuman. He just leaped up in the air and he flew through the air. And as he was flying, out of the ocean waters, there arose the figure of a great demoness. Her name was Surasa. And Surasa used to waylay anything that's flying through the air. She would rise up and she would open her mouth and eat it up. And so out of the waters, there arose this head and this mouth that was open. And these sharp teeth, as Hanuman is flying along, he sees this big mouth with these sharp teeth. What can he do? Well, he has another power. His power is Mahima. That is, he can expand his body to great proportions. He got bigger and bigger and bigger. But Surasa had the same power. The mouth got bigger and bigger. And Hanuman flying through the air. What could he do at the very last minute? He had another power in his toolbox. That is anima. He could make himself as small as a little molecule, which he did, and he went right through the teeth of Surasa and continued there to the battlefield in Ceylon. Example of a siddhi. Let me give you another example from the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He was visited by two devotees, Girija, Chandra and Girija. And one day, Sri Ramakrishna, in the company of devotees, and in the company of this Girija, they went to visit Shambhu Malik, and they discussed all afternoon. Finally, when they left, it was pitch dark outside, and nobody had thought to bring a lantern. And so they were having difficulties finding their way back to the temple at Dakshineshwar. Everything was pitch dark. Girija said, no problem. He said, let me go out in front, and you follow my lead. And as he went out in front of the group, he turned his back, and from his back there issued a great floodlight. A flood of light that lit up the whole road all the way back to the temple. And so the devotees were able to return in this way to the temple. Now, these are examples of psychic powers. The yogis in ancient times, now there are many different yogis in all the forests, and they're all scattered all over, and they're all in pursuit of their own inner light. And so they were aware of the existence of these powers. It wasn't until they were collated and organized by Patanjali, and they became known, what we know today, as Raja Yoga, sometimes called the science of yoga. Now, one reason it's called a science is that in science, things are always explained from within, and without any reference to some metaphysical or supernatural power. Now, it was always thought that these powers, these extraordinary psychic abilities, people thought that these were gifts of the gods, or that they were just freaks of nature, or that they were given by some visitation of the muse. But the yogis, that is the Raja yogis, had a more scientific bent of mind, and they investigated these things, and they came to some remarkable conclusions. One conclusion they came to is that these are not supernatural, that these are powers that are hidden within the depths of the psyche of the individual. And just as you may have on your cell phone, maybe you want to get a particular application, you go to the App Store to download that particular application, and you're told you already have it. It's already on your phone. Talking about phone. And in fact, when we go there, we can see that, yeah, it's already installed on the phone. It's just that it's hidden. And we have to open it up. And we tap, and there it opens. We already had it all along. Similarly, it is with these powers. They're potentials in the psyche. And just as many things, and the yogis discovered, there's just like many things, like our heartbeat, like the digestion, we don't know who is it that digests our food. We don't. We say, I don't do it. I don't know anything about it. I don't know how it happens. How does it happen? Well, it must be God who, it must be Vaishwanara who digests my food. Because I know that I don't do it. That would be an explanation of how they used to think. But the yogis just said, no, not necessarily so. Because they discovered that you could bring back the memory, the control. You could get back control of your heartbeat. You could get back control of your digestion power. With the movement of the vital forces in the body, bring them back under your control. That indeed, that you are in control of your own person. Now, these powers were never of any interest to the yogis. We're going to talk about later what this yoga is. But these powers, they were curious at first to find out what they were, because they're part of mental science. But after they had found out, what they were, they lost interest in them. But there were certain individuals who did become interested in these powers and who took them up as ends in themselves and who began to pursue them. And they didn't know anything about them. They didn't know how they worked. They didn't know what their potentials were or anything about them. And time passed, and it wasn't long before the real yogis began to tell tales of caution. Now, we're acquainted with those in all cultures. For example, the ancient Greeks, Prometheus, he stole the fire from the gods. He had a brother, his name was Epimetheus. He married the first mortal woman. The first mortal woman was created by the Greek gods. Her name was Pandora. And she was given each one of the gods gave her a blessing and a virtue. And so she had all these wonderful virtues. In the end, when she was going to be incarnated on the earth, Zeus thought, she's just too perfect. She's more perfect than the gods. Let me give her a magic box. So he gave her this box, and he said, you go and you enjoy your life, but whatever you do, please do not open this box. And you know what Pandora did. As soon as she got home, she opened the box. And out of that came all of the mosquitoes and the flies and the diseases and the illnesses and all the troubles of the world. Similarly, we know about the story about the boy, Jack, who one day he made a trade in the marketplace for some beans. And he came home and he thought these are worthless. He threw them out the window. And when he got up in the morning, he saw that there's a giant beanstalk. They were magic beans. A giant beanstalk going up into the heavens. And he was curious. He climbed up the beanstalk. He got up there to the top in the clouds. He looked around. He saw a palace, a castle. He went over there, crossed the drawbridge, walked inside, looked around. And there he saw a lot of wonderful things, among which was a hen that laid golden eggs. He thought, this is very good. I think I'll just take this. Put it under his arm, and he was leaving. But he made some noise. And he woke up the giant who lived there. And the giant was very vexed with that boy, because you know it's not very nice to go into somebody's house and to take his stuff. That's what he had done. And he was chased by that giant. Well, you know the rest of the story, how he barely escaped with his life. Similarly, we know about the famous poem that was written by the German philosopher Goethe about the sorcerer's apprentice. The sorcerer had a workshop, and there he had a disciple. And one day he went off into the village, and he gave his disciple a list of chores to do. But no sooner had he left that, well, it was a long list. And one thing on the list was to bring water from the well. Now, this disciple was kind of lazy, but he had a little bit of knowledge. And he knew how to charm a broom, and they could do the carrying for him. And sure enough, soon enough, the broom was going back and forth carrying the pails of water. But it wasn't long before he had enough water, and he didn't know how to stop the broom. Pretty soon the whole workshop was awash with water. And it wasn't until the master returned and he knew the charm to stop the broom and restore order to the workshop. So this is the way tales of caution that are now circulating from the yogis, the real yogis, the Raja yogis. The yogis said the idea is that these powers sometimes, well, not only were they put us in difficulty, but sometimes they just seem to be not of much use to us at all. Kind of a waste of time, because you know these powers do not just suddenly, you're just kind of going along and suddenly bam, this appears and a power appears in your mind. No, just like you have anything, you discover within yourself a talent or a skill you have. First you have to become aware of it, then you have to develop it, and you have to train it, and then you'll have the skill. The skill just doesn't come popping into your mind. Now, take an example. An example is that of a yogi he was a sadhu, who did spiritual prayer, was doing intense tapasya in the forest, and the word kind of went out that he had some of these powers. And one day a holy man came by that way and said, I've heard that you have some siddhis. What can you do? Well, at about that time, there was an elephant walking by. And the sadhu said, what can I do? Let me show you what I can do. And he picked up a pinch of dust, held it in his hand, and he just charmed that dust. He threw the dust on the elephant, and the elephant began to shiver and to shake and to groan and to moan, and he fell over dead. And the holy man said, well, it's very impressive. You certainly do have that power. Tell me, can you bring that elephant back to life again? No problem, said the sadhu. Picked up another pinch of dust. Charmed that dust, threw it on the elephant. The elephant moaned and groaned and shivered and shook, and he stood up, and he was okay again. He brought him back to life, and then the holy man looked and said, well, yeah, okay. Now you killed the elephant, and you brought him back to life. Can you tell me, so what? I mean, what have you gotten out of this? And it made the sadhu thoughtful. Because he thought, yeah, what was it worth? Was it worth it? Is it worth all this time? See, it took time for him to develop that power. Sri Ramakrishna tells about the two brothers. One brother, the eldest and the younger. The eldest brother married, and he settled down in house at home. The younger brother, however, renounced the world and went off into the Himalayas to do tapasya. Now, after 12 years, the scriptures say that after 12 years, a sadhu, a monk, you can return home to your ancestral home, and which he did. And the younger brother came. Oh, said his brother welcomed him. Yes, brother, so you've been away all these 12 years. Tell me, what have you achieved after this time? And the younger brother said, you want to see what I've achieved? Come with me. Now, right in front of that house, there flowed a great river. And the river, the younger brother walked down to the river. He stepped into the water, and then, lo and behold, he walked on the water. Walked on the water across to the other side. And on the far distant side, hello, brother, did you see what I just did? Meanwhile, the elder brother went down to the riverbank. He paid the ferryman 1 penny, and he crossed over the river. And he came, he says, yes. He says, yes, I saw what you did. That really was an amazing. But can you tell me, what is the value? I don't see the value in this. In fact, I don't think that what you've done has any more value than the penny that I paid to the ferryman. Like that. These are the stories the Raja Yogis are telling. Tales of caution about, what's the point of all this? We talk about Chandra and Girija. Chandra also was another devotee who came to the Dakshineshwar temple at the time of Sri Ramakrishna. And Chandra had a siddhi. He could hold in his hand a little gutika, that means like a little pellet of sacred herbs, and reciting a charm, he could render himself invisible. Now, for a while there in the Dakshineshwar temple, he used to amuse himself by standing in the courtyard and watching the long line of devotees who are going to go in and make pranams in the shrine to the image. He would stand out there and he would listen into the conversations. Nobody could see him, and that amused him. But later on, he began thinking, you know, Mathur Babu, who's the manager of this whole temple, has a daughter. And the wheels of his brain were turning round and round. And one day, in fact, he decided to render himself invisible, and he followed that girl home and into the house and into the inner apartments. Now, the inner apartments, well, we don't know about them, but in ancient times, the inner apartments are for ladies only. No men are allowed to go there. But Chandra, there he was behind a curtain, and but then lo and behold, he began to feel like his mind, though, was coming down to a lower level. He was beginning to lose control over the siddhi. Maybe some of you have seen the scene there, that movie by Dr. Jekyll. Remember the story? Robert Louis Stevenson. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's a scene there in a movie with Claude Rains. Dr. Jekyll is seated on the bench in a park with his fiancée, and the sun is shining and the birds are singing, and she's sitting next to him, and her lily white hand is on the bench, and he puts his hand over hers, and it's a romantic moment. But what is his horror when he looks down and he sees that his hand is growing hairs, these horrible black hairs. In other words, he's turning into Mr. Hyde. He's lost the power. It used to be he had to go to the laboratory, right, and drink the potion. Now he doesn't. He's switching back and forth. He's lost control. Similarly, it was with Chandra. He suddenly found himself materialized in the inner apartments. And the ladies screamed, and they called, guards were called, and he was dragged out. And he had a great fall in spiritual life and a famous scandal in the temple of Dakshineshwar. So these are the stories about the use of the siddhis. Now, you know, they say about the yogis that at the end, if you achieve the ultimate, the end of Raja Yoga, the highest achievement, near the end of these high samadhis, there is a samadhi which is called the cloud of virtue. And Sri Ramakrishna, of course, who was the master of all spiritual achievements, one day he approached his disciple Narendra, that is later Swami Vivekananda, and told him, he said, you know, I have all the powers have come to me, but I never use them. I don't want to use them. My whole mind and will is dedicated to the service of the Divine Mother. I have no use for these powers. And I want to give them to you. Will you take them? And Narendra said, well, will they help me to realize God? And he said, Sri Ramakrishna said, no, they won't help you, but maybe they'll help you in your work later on. Swami Vivekananda said, sorry, I don't want them. Keep them for yourself. And as he said that, he looked and he saw that the master was very well pleased. Now, so much for psychic powers. Our subject this morning is the psychic and the spiritual. Let's look at the spiritual. What does it mean to be spiritual? Spiritual means that you walk in the Spirit. What is the Spirit? The Spirit is that immaterial part of yourself. It's your essence. It is your true nature. It's the spark of divinity within you. It is the God within you. In Raja Yoga, it's called the Purusha, the consciousness, the conscious self. In Vedanta, it's called the Atman. That's your true self. Spirituality means that you have a kind of a sense about the nature of the macrocosm. You have a kind of an intuition and a sense about the nature of this world. We begin to intuit what Buddha called the 3 signs of being, that all is suffering, that all is empty, that all is transient. And you begin to feel like you're living in an absurd theater. You begin to feel like there must be something. There must be some rationale. There must be some, what is it? Can I find a higher meaning of life? And we begin to think, yes, there must be a higher world. There must be some higher world beyond this phenomenal world. Similarly, it is with thinking about the microcosm, our own self. We think about ourself, and we think that I have within me much greater potential. I know I can intuit and feel that I have a higher potential, that I'm not just limited to the body and to the conditioning of the mind. That I am body, mind, and spirit, and that I can transcend the body and the mind. And thus those are spiritual feelings. That's that we want to embrace our spirituality. Now let's look at the difference between the psychic and the spiritual. They differ in the means and in the ends. Well, they differ in the means and in the ends. What is the end of psychic power? Well, it's to attain siddhis. What is a siddhi? Siddhi just means an achievement, a wonderful accomplishment. A siddhi means, in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, they're called vibhutis. Vibhutis just means wonderful talents. And we look around us. We see in Hollywood, what do we see? All we see is stars and celebrities and people who've manifested talents. Those are vibhutis, kind of. Those are like, it doesn't matter if they're secular or sacred or secular or religious or anything. They really are kind of, Sri Krishna says there in the Gita, these are kind of like sparks of my splendor. They remind, when you see people like this, extraordinary people, they kind of remind you of there's some higher power. And so all of these are kind of a metaphor. In other words, siddhi is not just psychic. It's a metaphor for all empowerment. But you see, all of the powers that we have and achieve in life, in this thing, Sri Krishna says, they are a spark of my splendor. Now, a spark is not the same as the fire. And these powers are representations, that is, their reflection. They remind us of divinity, but they're not divine. They're not spiritual per se. Why? Because they're all about the refinement and the development of the powers of the body, of the senses, just refining, that's all clairvoyance is, refinements of the indriyas, and of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing. And so all of these are part of the natural, these are all parts of the natural man and are part of what in psychology is called self-actualization. Wonderful if we could actualize all of the powers within us. That's a good, positive goal in life. But that's not spirituality. Spirituality is all about the goal. We're talking about comparing the goal. That's the goal. The goal of spirituality is not self-actualization. It is self-realization. Self-realization means if the power is like the reflection, the spirituality is like the light. The yogis are not content with becoming a powerful, very well-trained caterpillar. They want transformation. They want to be completely transformed. They don't just want to become a better and better and better caterpillar. They want to become a butterfly. That's called enlightenment. And that's the goal of spiritual life, is enlightenment. So we have two different goals here. Furthermore, these psychic and the spiritual differ in another way. They differ in their means. Now, Patanjali in the 4th chapter, the very first verse of the 4th chapter, there are yoga aphorisms, he describes the means of attaining these siddhis. They're 5 in number. The first one is, which we're kind of maybe understand, would be something, it's called that sometimes people are born with these powers. We don't really know why. They're born with a siddhi. And we can take as an example a famous mathematician. His name was Srinivasa Ramanujan. I like this story because it's kind of an interesting story. He was born in South India, in Madras, in a village near Madras. He never had formal training in mathematics, but he used to have visions. And he was a religious man. And his god and his goddess would reveal things mathematical to him. And just as Beethoven and Bach would hear the music of the spheres, so he would see numbers. And all these amazing theorems and interesting numbers and correspondences. And he would write down in hundreds and hundreds, he'd scribble these down in hundreds of notebooks. And in the course of time, he was kind of discovered. And he was taken to Cambridge University. And there the mathematicians were stunned and amazed to see some of his theories. And in fact, today, these are thousands of these theory ideas that he had. One by one, they worked through these proofs. And now, today, up till now, they say that up to 800 or 900 of his discoveries have been confirmed by mathematical proofs. So he was a real psychic. But we want to notice that we're using him as an example of a psychic. He was a religious man, but he was not a trained sadhaka. He was not on a conscious, intentional, spiritual path. He was not a Raja Yogi. These things would just come to him spontaneously. And although he felt that they came from the mind of God, so that's an example. That's that's giving you one. Patanjali lists the 5 reasons. One is the use of sacred plants and like the soma, mushrooms. Number 3 was what? Is mantras. These are all ways of getting siddhis. Tantric mantras. 4th would be extreme physical austerities. And 5 is just sometimes that the techniques of Raja Yoga were taken out of context and were applied piecemeal to the pursuit of the siddhis. So these are the means of attaining the siddhis. Now the means of it in our Raja Yoga is totally different. The yoga is a totally different process. For one thing, it is a systematic, methodical process. The 8 steps of what today we call Raja Yoga, and beginning with moral and ethical virtues, continuing on to spiritual virtues. Moral virtues are not enough. We have to have spiritual virtues. And then the control of the vital energies, control of the vital breath, and most importantly, control of the mind, withdrawing the mind, and developing the powers of the mind, which are called the powers of samadhi, that is, of concentration of mind. And the purpose of it all, the purpose of all of this, was not to achieve samadhi, it was to achieve kaivalya. That means liberation of the soul. That was the purpose. So Raja Yogi, you are a yogi, you are a Raja Yogi. You're not a yogi if you just sit down and practice a little meditation. That doesn't make you a yogi. Yogi, you have to be a yogi. You have to be engaged and committed to all of the steps, all of the process, the whole package. It's a package deal. You call yourself a Raja Yogi if you're working on all of the steps and if your goal is liberation. You can't call yourself a yogi unless your goal and purpose is self-liberation and self-knowledge. So there we have difference in means. There's difference in the ends and difference in the means. There's also a difference in the line of development. The line of development. Personal development of the personal psyche is a horizontal line. We begin, we're born, we learn how to walk and talk, we learn how to see and to hear and to think, feeling, and willing. You may even develop clairvoyance and clairaudience. All of those are on a horizontal plane because they're all about developing the personal self. They're not spirit. You still haven't begun spiritual life. And even if you have these powers, doesn't make you spiritual. There are many super psychics who are very ordinary, not even religious people. And there are many religious people and great saints who are not psychic. In fact, if you ask any of the swamis in our order, are you psychic? Can you walk on water? They'll tell you no. Why? Because they're not interested. This belongs on a different sort system. Spirituality is a vertical path. Vertical means it's about transcending. It's not about developing the personal self. It's about transcending the personal self. Transcending the ego. And by the ego here, of course, we mean the whole package. The body, the mind, the body, the senses, the intellect, the memory, the whole of the that is the spirituality means the transcendence of that. Spirituality is about developing character, not just moral character or dramatic character, but your character as your nature. A shift. It's about a shifting in your consciousness to your higher nature, from the body to the mind to the soul. It's about identifying with the spirit. That's the goal of spiritual life. So this is kind of an overview. I've given you an overview of the psychic and the spiritual. The point here is that these powers are powers which exist. They exist as potentials within us, and they can be actualized. And there are methods available to actualize these powers. But the pursuit of these powers is not the goal of spiritual life. The goal of spiritual life is different. Furthermore, the acquisition of any of these powers does not help us in spiritual life. Zero help to us. Furthermore, having one of these powers is no indication that you are spiritual. These are two different. These are on two different lines of development. The only indication that you're spiritual is that you begin to develop moral and spiritual virtues, and you commit yourself to self-realization and to God-realization, as it says in the Christian theology. The purpose of our life is to love God and Him only to serve. No, please, yeah.
All right, well, so tomorrow, let's see, next week, we have Swami Vedarupananda also giving the talk on yoga and psychotherapy. And of course, during the week, we will continue to have our Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday classes, but Friday we have a special program, Buddha's birthday celebration, bathing the baby Buddha, the life of Buddha, Buddhist chanting with a guest Soto Zen monk. And Ram Nam is the next Saturday, and then the Sunday lecture. So you're welcome to attend all of those events.
Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Ham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti O Shadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantirehi Om Shanti 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 Om. Peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.
You'll be doing Q&A? So you'll be doing the Q&A?
Q&A, there's stuff in the green room.
No, it's all done.
In the green room.
It's all cleaned up.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
and the refreshments too,
Question,
so.
answer, and commentary in the green room. Immediately after we're finished here.
Please, meet the Swami, do have some refreshment, and then go to the greenhouse and sit with him.
Yeah, so we'll be in the green room.
Yeah.